moving on and getting over, that's the trouble.
What's up, fam? Welcome back to the Time is Ripe podcast. My name is Scott Smith, and I'm your host here on the Time is Ripe. This is a podcast of Ripe Creatives, which is a ministry based in the great city of Philadelphia that leverages the arts for the purpose of missions and community transformation. You can find out a whole bunch of information about us at ripecreatives.com, which is our website, new and improved. We love that thing. But here on The Time is Ripe, this is a podcast where we go back in time to talk about things that happened in our Ripe community. This is basically a digital journal for our community. A lot of times we're talking about events that we hosted and produced here in the city, or we're talking about a retreat that we went on, or we're talking about an event where we got booked to go somewhere else. Today is a really special episode as we go back in time to August 17th, 2024. It was a Saturday at a place called Deke's Barbecue, where an event took place called Two Lines Philly. And it's a very special story, very special episode, and we're going to dive into all of that. But in order to do that well, I got to introduce a couple of our guests. By the way, shout out to Top Mop Productions over there, running all the audio for this amazing podcast. Make sure you look up Top Mop Productions. He's the best. But I'm going to introduce our guests for today's episode. There's three of us on this total. First up is a returner to the pod. He has been on many episodes over the years, and he is back again. Mr. Greg Snow, welcome back to the pod.
Thank you, Scott. It's a pleasure to be here, as always.
Still no Free the Poets. That's two in a row. 2 episodes in a row. He did not say Free the Poets, people.
I'm maturing. Free the Poets.
There it is. We also have a first-time visitor, first-time guest on the podcast. We are hoping that this is not her last. On the last episode, which was Agape Fest, we actually talked about this woman a lot, quite a bit anyway. She is one of our favorite people in the whole wide world. We love her to life. She's meant so much to our community, and specifically to the Two Lines team. But it's her first time on The Time is Ripe. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the podcast, Simone Wesley.
Hi, guys. It's nice to be here.
It's really good to have you, Simone. Simone, one of the things that we ask all of our guests to do as first timers on the pod is introduce themselves to the audience as if somebody has never met you before. So who is Simone? You know, all the good things. What do you do? What are you about? What are you passionate about? And then how did you connect to this thing called Ripe?
Cool. Okay. Well, my name is Simone. The most prominent thing about me is probably that I'm a teacher. I teach middle school in North Philly, and I love it. I've loved kids for a lot of my life, and I really believe that transforming and encouraging our youth is one of the best ways to make an impact in the world in the future. Outside of that, I love people, so it's just easy to be around people. I like to hang out with people. I like to do things with people. It doesn't really matter what. And I love food. I love to eat, especially tacos.
Yes, shout out to tacos. Simone, you are amazing, and we love you so much. How did you get connected to this whole Ripe shenanigan?
That's a good question. So there's kind of 2 ways that hit a crossroads. So I started, I guess my first connection was through Demir. So I started dating someone who was already in Ripe, and he was like, you should come to Ripe family nights with me. And I was like, okay, this is cool. And I liked it. But I didn't feel like a very personal, commitment connection necessarily. Like, everyone was cool, but I didn't feel like there's something I'm really invested in here necessarily. Other than just being a part of people's lives, getting to know them. And then, I met Greg in college. And then, a few years later, when he moved to Philly, he stayed, with us, and we were just friends for a while. So there was a show that Two Lines had in Philly, and he asked me to bring a charcuterie board, and I was like, sure. And I got there early, and I was like, if there's anything else you want me to do, just let me know. And he was like, yeah, could you work the door? And I was like, that seems like a really big job for someone who just happened to be here. But I ran the door, and it was really fun. So I was like, if you ever want help again, just let me know. It was pretty cool. And then later that week, he put me in a group chat and was like, when can you guys like, when are you free this week for a meeting? And I was like, wow, this is a really quick and intense volunteer level thing. And since then I've been, I think, at almost every Two Lines show. And now I do a lot more. And that, was like my more major segue into Ripe. So once Two Lines went under the spiritual covering of Ripe, I felt like that was like really what plugged me into Ripe.
Yeah. It's a heck of a strategy there. Charcuterie board to, run the door to the group chat to officially a member of the team.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of our strategies had been, like, instead of just recruiting people that were interested, I kind of went a different approach and was like, let me find my friends who are talented and would be willing to maybe support me on some things, and let's do it together. So, yeah, we're so glad Simone's been on our team these last several years. And I know it's been, Two Lines would not be the same without her. And so we're so glad to have this convergence of Two Lines and Ripe, and now to be here celebrating this podcast episode with y'all.
Amen, amen. Now we gotta get to this whole night of the event soon, but there's a couple things even that Simone brought up, because this is actually the first episode about Two Lines where Two Lines is a part of Ripe.
Yeah.
Because we did an episode about Two Lines actually before Two Lines became an official part of Ripe Creatives, and kind of like within the ministry vision of Ripe Creatives. So we actually, Simone just talked about how like her way into Ripe was really Two Lines, and then Two Lines becoming a part of Ripe. Greg, share a little bit about kind of your heart there for Two Lines to be a part of the overall ministry side.
Yeah, so I will say, if you want the history of like Two Lines, go back to season 2 and check out our episode with Sergine, because that is where you get to hear all that. So I'm just going from before. I'm going on from that. As a Two Lines crew, we sensed that it would benefit us to have a more surrounding community with us. And now we'd always been connected with Scott, and so it's kind of like an easy connection where we had been building a relationship with Scott. Scott had helped us a lot, given us a lot of wisdom, but our whole Two Lines crew had not been involved in the entire community. So I think now it was like, hey, we want to get into a space where we can really be poured into very organically, very naturally, to kind of give us the best opportunity we have to free the poets and to love people well through poetry.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was kind of like a no-brainer. I mean, it helps that half your team are Ripe poets already.
Yeah.
Right, between you and AVG. And then Jake Doggett, who is a pseudo-Ripe poet. He's a Ripe person who is a poet and on his way, I would say, in that direction. But then also Devin. Devin is somebody that the Ripe community has known for quite a while now. She actually did a gallery as a featured artist at a creatives gallery. You can go back and actually hear that episode. And Devin's a part of the team, and then Simone. And Simone, as she said, already had a connection with somebody special to her within the Ripe community who's a Ripe artist as well. And so all 5 people on the Two Lines team were already around the community or had connected with the community. And so it was kind of like a no-brainer.
Exactly.
In the sense of, let's do this together and let's try to figure this out. And so, I think it was in the fall that became official. And the other kind of fun thing about Two Lines that I think is a part of this story is you've been in existence for 3 years. So August 17th, 2024, the date that we're talking about, this was the 3-year anniversary.
Yep.
In 3 years, you've done probably 34 shows, something like that.
Yep.
You probably skipped like 2 months out of the year, out of the 3 years.
34 different venues.
That's what I was going to say. I was going to say it's probably been like, probably not 34, but probably like 10. I mean, it's probably been 10.
Yeah, we've been close to 10. And I know, for us, like, there were moments where, at least I wasn't showing it, but it was like, okay, we've done our 4th venue and 4 shows. Like, are we going to make it? Like, are we going to be able to like hang on? You know, I don't think I think I look back, I'm like, wow, I'm surprised we actually are still here. And so one of the recent venue changes we made was we linked up with our good friends over at Deke's Barbecue in Germantown. And so we had discussed with them about entering their space, and they gave us a really welcoming entryway into their space, and gave us like, hey, we want you here, and this is how we want you here. And so we were able to work that out. And since February of 2024, we've been in Deke. So this was our 6 months anniversary almost of even being in Deeks every month. So it was really cool to kind of be 6 months in the same place. And this was our second show we actually got to do outside, which we had always been excited about doing Deke's barbecue outside. But when we did it in July, it was like, oh, this is probably the best venue we've ever been in. Yeah. And to get to do it now, our second show, we took some notes, we had some ideas, and we're like, we're going to do this differently, we're going to do this differently, we're going to do this differently. So there was a lot of anticipation going into this show, knowing our anniversary shows usually do a little better, knowing it's outside, it's a nice day, it wasn't too hot, and we also were doing it on a Saturday, which we're hoping would attract more people.
Yeah, all of those things were the perfect storm for a really, really, really successful event. Now, the one interesting thing, so if you haven't gone back and listened to the season 2 episode about Two Lines, maybe you don't know this. So Two Lines, typically, it is a spoken word poetry open mic event. I would say 9 or 10 months out of the year, it is that. A couple of times, Two Lines has become a slam, which is more of like a competition with 8 to 10 artists or whatever competing against each other. But this was actually the first time you did something totally different. And I think it was very fitting to do this for your 3-year anniversary. You decided to do a showcase instead of an open mic. So, even though you guys have a feature at every show, most of the night is open mic. And the open mic is really what attracts people, because people want to talk their stuff. They want to share their story. They want to get their piece across. And so most people who come to an open mic are coming because they want to perform on the open mic. The showcase, nobody's coming to perform. They're coming to support. They're coming to listen and receive something from the artists that were already selected. So this was a very different show for you guys. But I think everybody's benefited so much from Two Lines. Two Lines has done such a great job in the city of caring for people that when it was like, hey guys, we have a big deal happening Saturday, August 17th, and we got 5 artists that you guys would want to come listen to, even though you don't get to spit tonight, come through. Everybody came.
Exactly. And I just want to briefly talk about how we came to this showcase, because there's a lot of people to really thank in this process. And just, I'd say, man, recently what really sold the deal was being out in Houston and going to Scott Free and Courtney Love's We Go Live. Man, their showcases are amazing. And it was like, okay, we're not going to make this We Go Live because that's a special place in Houston. But, man, maybe we can showcase our own Two Lines way, and we can kind of, to see them pioneer is just amazing. And just learning from them was like, it felt like we were kind of like chefs, like staging in a kitchen, like just like watching, this is how it's done. And it was like, so thank you, Scott, and the whole team, Deuce, all you guys, thank you so much. And also just like, this has been an idea of, we want to have conversations constantly happening within our community. We usually do a question every show. And so we had a chance where each feature would be asked a question, which we've done before at some shows, and then also asked a question to the audience. And that was very distinct for us. And usually at our anniversaries, we try to bring back features from old Two Lines. And so it was really cool to bring back some people that have been features and just love on them some more and really see how they've grown and how they've changed. So it was a really fun show for us to even put together, let alone be at.
I'll say, to add to that, I remember after our last slam, we had a meeting afterwards, and I remember us asking ourselves, what is the DNA of Two Lines? What's our purpose? And does a slam fit that? And I remember us coming to the conclusion that it doesn't really fit that. We care a lot about our community. We care a lot about supporting it, and the slam has never really fulfilled that mission. And out of that, I think we started to push forward into like, what would an anniversary show look like that would actually feed our community the way we actually try to do. And that's where we looked to honor features who've already been there, and bless them, but also take that and push forward into further community, like Greg said, by asking questions for the audience to start to connect with one another.
So good. Yeah, I think the stage has been set extremely well. Let's talk about August 17th, 2024, the 3-year anniversary of Two Lines. You guys had 5 poets that you pre-selected to be the features for the night. Talk me through who the 5 were, and if there's any like nuance around why you selected these people. I think that would be amazing to hear.
So our first feature, Complex Angel, and she is someone that has been a regular in our community, especially since the fall of 2023. And so we've just seen her coming around a lot, and then she did a feature for us back in the spring. And then we're like, all right, let's bring her back. And we felt like AVG should ask her a question because they've done some events together and they have some connection. And so it was really cool to see her just perform and always excel in her craft. I feel like she's always growing, and she's someone that she's around a lot, but you don't get tired of her poetry. Her poetry just keeps exciting you and keeps bringing you in.
Yeah, she's also someone I would say who does a great job of contributing to the poetry community herself.
Exactly.
She's constantly trying to pour into poets. She curates a variety of events for poets. So I think that too, especially in looking at our community, I always feel like Complex really reflects what it means to be a poet who contributes back to the poets around them as well.
Yeah, and then we had E the Poet MC, who had featured with us back in April, but I actually had met him a couple years ago out of Two Lines. We did we featured a guy by the name of Femi the Dry Fish, and I remember even then he was just like, here's my number, like connect with me. And I was very new to the scene, but he was just like, let's connect. And every time I would see him and his wife, Lady Sarcasm, would always come up and talk to me, make sure I'm okay, give me a hug. They're just really sweet people. And I remember at our last show that he featured at in April, he just said, hey, like what you're doing here is special, and I would love to always be a part of it. And so when we had something like this, and several members of our crew, it might have been like Jake, and I think Simone would have been in this conversation as well, saying, hey, like we want to see a little more of E. We want to get a little more of where he is growing, and because he's someone that's just been in the game for so long, we felt like we need that perspective.
Yeah, it's actually kind of crazy because I think E's probably the person I know the longest in this entire conversation because of him just being around the poetry scene in Philadelphia for a very long time. And I'm old, guys, so it's very cool to see the old and the new kind of collide in that kind of way. So I thought that was kudos to you guys for being able to get him, and kudos to him for having that humility of like, yeah, I want to come be a part of this new thing, even though he's done his own stuff and toured and, done books and sold books and traveled around and performed his features, kind of all over the place. I think that was a beautiful fit for the night.
Most definitely. And in the middle of the show, we had our fan favorite. Now, we love all the poets, but Miss Spoken Poet is a part of the Right Poetry team. So she's our favorite. She's our favorite, man. We love her. We love her character. We love who she is. And then when she gets on the mic, all that just comes together. And it's amazing. Jayla's our fan favorite. And, shout out to all the other poets. But, she's a part of Right Poetry. She's someone we care about so much and just love it when she hits the mic because she's just a caring person and an amazing person. And then when she just hits the mic, she just goes crazy. And she has so many different poems, and all of her sets are all different. And you can tell she's just someone who really cares about her craft, and it's awesome to see her grow as a person, as a poet, and to really want to care for others every time she has a stage. Yeah,
Jayla is someone she's someone I've always loved to be around. Definitely one of the first poets that really made me love poetry. And when we were talking about bringing back poets to kind of honor them, Jayla was like the reason I wanted to do that. She was the first one that popped in my mind. And part of that is the first time I ever saw Jayla perform, I remember asking her how long she'd been doing it for. And she told me she'd been performing for about 3 months, which felt like it was like nothing. And I was amazed at how great she was. And since then, she's really only grown. So I thought it would be awesome to have her come back and just show how much she's flourished in the last few years. But even beyond that, I mean, she's a beautiful person. She has such a sweetheart, and I love spending time with her. So it's always a win to get her in Philly anyways. So
Yeah, Jayla, we love you. We actually did an entire episode about this young woman, talking about our trip down to Busboys and Poets in season 2. And one of my favorite episodes actually from season 2 was that conversation about the Busboys trip. That was actually before Jayla was even a Right Poet.
Uh-huh.
And
that
we
was
just
first
that
met her.
was that was basically the precipice, the beginning of our relationship.
Yep.
And we knew she was an incredibly special person. And yeah, she ended up joining Write Poetry and got to be a part of the Pass the Mic tour and away with us. With the fourth night, she had some family stuff going on there. She missed a couple of the first shows, but she was there with us in Philly to close out Pass the Mic. And then she was on the We Go Live episode. We talked about her on the We Go Live episode because she went to Houston with us for a week. So incredible amount of relationship has been developed with Jayla. Shout out to Misspoken Poet. If you have Instagram, you need to follow her because she be dropping some words. The only way to describe it is like every single line is like a quote. You know what I mean? Like it could go in a quote book forever because she just like, she doesn't waste a word. You know, she's so incredibly talented as a writer and a performer. Who was after, you know, that highlight in the middle, Misspoken Poet? Who was fourth?
Man, you thought it was just going to highlight there, but it kept going, and it was T-Sleeveless. He just was raw and authentic, and we love T. I remember meeting T with Scott at a place called Miss Sally's Blues. Such a cool name. We just love meeting T and getting to know him over the years and having him feature at Two Lines and having him be in our anniversary. Our first anniversary, he was actually involved in, so it was kind of, and our second anniversary, he was supposed to be one of the judges, and then he got sick, and then now to have him at our third anniversary, so really much T. If we could, we would have had you at every anniversary. We want to having T be a part of Two Lines has just been it's very essential for us. Just because he's been someone that's been impacted by what we do, and also just gives back. Viral poet is doing all these amazing things, going all over the country, but always has a time and space for Two Lines and for us as people, and just have always respected him for that, for wanting to come back and never like he's bigger or better, anything different, but just like he said, like he himself says that when he's at Two Lines, he's home, and we just love to have him home.
Yes, he's so genuine. I think that's the number one thing that stood out to me about him is that no matter what he has going on, what like his ups, downs, every time he walks into Two Lines, he has a huge smile and he's so excited to be there. And that always makes me think of him as like a Two Lines poet that we always want to welcome back.
Shout out to T-Sleeveless. Yeah, I had a very early relationship with T in terms of his poetry. Lewis and I actually went out to a show one of the first times that he performed at Sealy's. And I mean, I just was like, yo, you could do this full time. And he was still reading off his phone and he was nervous, shaking, but it was so obvious the gift that he had in his writing and delivery that like, if he really took this seriously, I felt like he could be a full-time poet, which he actually became for a season of life. He's not doing that currently, but he did it. He actually went full-time as an artist, as a poet, for a minute there, and just an amazing talent. But such a genuine soul and super humble. And I'm sure we're going to have more to say about him, in a bit. Who is the final poet?
So we had, our good friend Ambry, who is a glowing poet, and, she's also one of those cats from the DMV. And it's just good to have her up here. I remember, she was a part of our Two Lines Slam judges when we did our slam for our 2-year. And then the month after, she was our feature, and we just felt like, man, that feature was really cool, but we wanted to get her back. And really, she's been writing a new book recently, and she's doing a lot of different stuff. And we're like, hey, we want to see her growth. And she's someone as well as T that it's just like every time she's here, it's like she's just so happy to be here, and like it feels so different for her. It's really cool to have poets come into a space where like they're as happy to like be performing as we are that they're here performing, because they're that good. it's like this really cool symbiotic relationship that just we love, and love her. Thank you for being with us.
Yeah, I remember her feature, and it was just a weird time of year, weird show, and there were definitely less people in the audience than we typically have. And she was completely unfazed. She gave her all. She was a solid stand-up poet. She just like poured into the people that were there. And I remember talking to her afterwards and just saying like, hey, thank you so much. And she just like, her response was totally like, no, I was blessed. This is a great thing for me to be here. Which I feel like just really embodied, you know, the type of poet you want on your stage, someone who is about caring for the people in front of them, no matter how many. And so that really made me, when we think about a community night, want someone like her to be back on our stage to continue to represent what that means as a poet.
Yeah, that's good. So the lineup was Complex Angel, E the Poet MC, Misspoken Poet, T-Sleeveless, and
A Glowing Poet.
A Glowing Poet.
Okay, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm pretty sure T was second and E was fourth.
Oh, okay, so it was Complex Angel, then T-Sleeveless, then Misspoken Poet,
Yes.
E the Poet MC, into A Glowing Poet.
Yes, I'm pretty sure that was it.
I think you're right about that, because all of this connects with what I wanted to share about T. T, love you if you're listening to this. Care about you a ton. Man, T is such an interesting soul, because he is just so sensitive to, in my view, the Lord's voice, and that God has been like knocking on the door of this heart for a long time. Even going way back to Miss Seeley's Blues, having conversations with him in the parking lot then about his own poetry, but also about faith stuff. And I remember many times the two lines over the years that T-Sleeveless would come, and you could find him and Jake usually talking for like an hour after the show about philosophy and ancient Egyptian scripts and how the Gospels line up and faith, and like just amazing conversation. He's just an amazing thinker in general. But that night at the August 17th anniversary, T was struggling. Even as you said, he was going through some stuff, but came in with a smile on his face, but he was going through it. Okay. And I think when he got up on stage, first of all, this man came with chapbooks that he wrote that morning.
Yeah.
Like,
that's insane.
Crazy. He wrote an entire chapbook that night, like from midnight or whatever till 6 a.m, or got them printed and brought them with him, to get out. That's so rare. Like, people usually, chapbooks are stuff that they've been working on for a few weeks, a few months, or even in some cases, a few years. And he came with a chapbook that was that night, which is insane. That tells you how talented of a writer he is. But he does a couple pieces that he's already done, or at least one that he's done before. And then he did a new piece from the chapbook. That was maybe one of the most vulnerable pieces, maybe one of the most vulnerable performances of a piece I've ever seen. Yeah. Incredibly raw. Like, I don't want to give away any of the punchlines of the piece, but just talking about some very intimate moments in his life that you could tell as he was reciting it, because it was the first time he ever recited it, because he just wrote it that day, like spilled into the room. And it was like emotional. Yeah. And he gets through the piece. He did an amazing job. It's not a show. It's not like a performance for him. It is really his heart. Mm-hmm. And I remember him coming off stage, and I don't know what it was. I told my wife that I was like, I think it's just being a dad now. Shout out to my baby boy, Levi, where I'm just tired. I'm just like tired all the time because I have a newborn. And in that exhaustion, I just like don't have a filter anymore to like think about what the best way to do something is. I was just like, man, T, you need Jesus, brother. And he like looked at me, was like, I think you're right. I don't even know what he said back, but it was basically like like I'm struggling. I was just like, dude, like if you could just get the gospel stuff, if you could get your identity secure in something beyond yourself, if you could understand that God loves you and has a plan for you, if you could figure out what it means to have a relationship with God, all these other things are gonna are going to be less impactful on you and less of a burden on you. It's not to say that God's just going to take all that stuff away, but he'll walk you through it. And I literally could not tell you what I said to T that night, but we had this conversation and it was just clear that God was doing something. It was clear that God was like actively participating in the conversation, where God was kind of downloading words into me as my mouth was open with T. And, I ended up shooting a text to the team, to Simone, to Devin and Jake, and Greg and AVG. And I was like, hey, let's look to pray for T at the end of this night, because I think he needs prayer. And actually some other people in the group chat were like, I was thinking the same thing. Mm-hmm. And I was like, yeah, let's try to make sure that happened. Now our conversation ends, Misspoken Poet gets up and she is doing poems that literally speak to T-Sleeveless' situation that he's walking through right then and there. Yeah. Like, this just the way God works. Like, it wasn't like, let's do T-Sleeveless and then Jayla, so T-Sleeveless gets to hear the gospel. Like, that wasn't like our heart or intent in it. You know, it wasn't like a design thing. But I think from heaven's perspective, it was designed, because it was amazing how T's coming off stage in a place of vulnerability and what he's, just going through. Our conversation kind of sows some seeds, and then Jayla brings the gospel like full circle in a way that was incredibly beautiful and poet to poet palatable for him. And I was just like, yo, God is really doing something. So we worked through the rest of the lineup and E and, a glowing poet, amazing night. But at the end of the night, all of us were engaged in talking to people who were there, but all of us kind of were like looking forward to the moments that we could have with T-Sleeveless. What do you guys remember about that from your perspective?
I remember I remember emotionally the stark difference between his two pieces. So his first piece, like we said, T's been on our show before. The first piece was one we've heard before. We love that piece. Some of us know, most of us know at least pieces of it by heart. And so as soon as he entered, we were all like, oh my gosh, yes. And you could see T recognize that we all were excited. And we were like super excited. Energy was really high. And then in his very authentic T way, he was like, hey, I'm going to do a piece I just wrote. It's a little tougher. I'm going to try and get through it. And we were like, okay, cool. And you could feel like the emotion shift in the room to like, oh, this isn't just like poetry. This is like his heart, literally like as raw as could be right there in front of us. And I remember tearing up, and I don't usually cry that much at poets. But I heard multiple other people say they either teared up or started crying as well. Because it just was like him being so vulnerable about how he felt. And it wasn't a completely relatable feeling. And I think a lot of people in the crowd, especially poets, especially the parts of his poem that were addressing the fact of like, I come to shows, I put my whole heart out there, but what's after that? Like, what's at the end of the day when I'm no longer, when I'm not on the stage anymore? How do I care for my soul? And if I'm always writing poetry, does that mean I'm always hurting? And I think one thing that I don't think I connected till just now, but a glowing poet actually finished out her set. She had two pieces. One of them was specifically about how poets are supposed to use their gift for the Lord to plant seeds and to heal hearts. And so she almost answers T's question of like, why be a poet if I'm just hurting with be a poet because God's called you to use your talent to work for him. So that was just such a great, I just remember feeling really deeply for T. But definitely in awe of like what the Lord can do on a stage, when you give him space. So.
Oh my gosh. I literally have chills just thinking about the way that those things were lined up, because it was not a design thing.
We didn't know what pieces they were doing. We didn't know what pieces any of them were doing.
And we almost switched her too. We almost switched a glowing poet, maybe to like third. And then, I think somebody was like, it might have been you, Scott, was like, no, don't. Like, let's keep it. Someone said like, let's keep it. And I said, okay. Like, I won't even touch it. Did that work out? Like, it was just like, don't even change like this lineup. And, I mean, just what I think about what happened, man, I think for a while, like we sometimes have great shows and we leave and we're like, but what impact did we make?
Yeah.
What change did we see? And I think God has constantly been trying to reassure us, like, this is important. What you're doing matters. You need to keep doing it. You'll just be surprised at what you see. And so this, in some ways, God's just like, it took 3 years to even get to this moment. And then watching T be able to come into a space after critiquing, and the Glowing Poet as well, critiquing poetry spaces and being in places and just not feeling filled up, not feeling loved, but to come to a place where God is and to feel loved, to feel like they can even, it's not even just the critique, it's when you feel comfortable to be able to be like, I'm wrestling with this. Because that's a serious wrestle. You're basically saying, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know my purpose. I don't know why I'm here. And most people don't want to answer that question, let alone tell people that they're having that question. So for T to even bring that up was huge. And I think many poets, myself included, have felt like this. Should I be a poet? Should I keep going? Is this important? Why? Even those who, like me, know Jesus. It sometimes is hard to know if what you're doing actually does matter. And I think to see him bring that to the table, us connect and relate to that, and then be able to hear from him later and to care for him is like, okay, so yeah, T, you're part of the reason we do this. Like you are the reason we do this, you know? To see people like you be able to be in a place of love and care and know that you have a safe space in this world, like that is worth all of the money and to jump venues, and like it's worth it to see T. And we've had other stories as well of people that just get to be themselves and get to really open up. And so it was like a surreal moment of just like, is this actually happening? Is what we've been praying for, is like a moment so raw and so unique actually happening in our space? And that was just kind of like, oh, now we bring up the next poet. And we're the next poet. We just kind of keep going and don't know what's going to happen until Scott's like, actually, I talked with him. Let's pray for him. And we're like, we all want to pray for him because that's our heart in these shows, is we're looking for people to pray for. We're looking for people to connect to and to offer prayer. And we even offer prayer from the mic. If you need prayer, if you need to talk to somebody, come and see us. And that was definitely for T this night.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about how much what happened impacted us, I guess, and how much it meant, but we haven't even really shared exactly what happened. But basically, at the end of the night, he was selling all of his chapbooks, and I just asked, like, hey, would you be willing to let a couple people pray for you? And in my head, I knew it was going to be like all of us, but I don't know if he knew that I knew that. But basically, you know, we all just kind of stuck around. It wasn't just the Two Lines team. It wasn't just the right poets like myself and Sergine, who were there as well. I mean, all 5 of us were in the space together, which was kind of cool, with Jayla there, yep, and Sergine there, and then obviously AVG and Greg helping run the show. But it was also other artists within Ripe, like Demir, who was there to support Simone, and Leah, Ren as well. So we had almost like, you know, a dozen or so.
Olivia.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Olivia was there as well to come out and support. Olivia was a feature at the Two Lines about a year ago. So just like amazing. It was just like, it was the anniversary, right? Everybody was there to celebrate the anniversary. Everybody was there to be engaged, and then God's doing something. So everybody's like ready to pray. In this space around T. And actually even T had a friend with him, and there was kind of a whole thing there where he kind of was a part of the prayer circle with us a little bit. And, you know, he kind of got to have a moment in there as well. But we just got to like, just show tangible love to T, right? And it wasn't a big convoluted thing in front of a whole bunch of people. It was like very much out of the space, off to the side. But it was super meaningful. And you could tell it was meaningful. And it wasn't just about a moment, but it was like a connection point. This show was on a Saturday night, August 17th. The very next morning, Simone and Demir end up inviting T-Sleeveless to go to church. And he comes to a church in Philly that I'm a member of. My wife is a member of. Simone and Demir are members of, called Epiphany Fellowship. And T goes to service at Epiph.
Yeah.
And what he said to us, I mean, he said he loved it. He was like a little kid in a candy shop.
Yeah.
He was like, I've never been invited to church. Like he was like, I've been invited by like my mom or grandma or something. Like I've had to go to church. I've been to church before, but nobody's ever actually invited me to come to a service. This was great.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was really strange because I don't remember like the last time I've invited someone to church, and it really challenged me of like, why? Why haven't I asked more people to come?
Yep.
Just seeing T's willingness of he was like, yeah, sure, I'll be there. And just seeing the way he was encouraged there was great. Another thing that I was really blessed by 3 days later, so this would have been maybe that Saturday or Sunday, T actually posted his own thing about it. And it said, he talked about us praying for him. And then he also woke up to his entire college tuition being paid off.
Yep.
And he concludes this post on Instagram, which you guys should definitely follow him, by saying, "You are loved in ways that transcend our dialect, if only you'd accept it," referencing the love that God has for him. And it was just so cool to see that, like Greg said, we're trying to make an impact. And sometimes there's a question of like, do people feel it? And hearing that from T is being able to see like people really do feel God's love and are able to access it through the way God's able to use Two Lions, which is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's the beauty of it. Our job and our responsibility, we talk about this all the time on this podcast, just sow seeds, right? Sow seeds with gospel witness, and that's verbally as poets, specifically with us, or just in conversations, but also just in the way that we do things, right? Excellence, integrity, being generous, right? Showing off kingdom values of humility and honor. Even you guys wrestling through, hey, we're not a slam culture thing. Like we don't really want to stand with that because that's not really the kingdom. The kingdom isn't competitive in that sense, right? So we want to show a different family model of what relationship looks like. You don't know the impact you're having, but I think every once in a while, God will give you a glimpse to be able to see, oh, God's doing something in this person's life. And with T, I don't think you'll be offended by me saying this, like where T's life goes from here is undetermined, right?
Yep.
There's a fork in the road has happened for him where he's trying to make a different path for himself, but it's all going to come down to community. It's all going to come down to, okay, who do I surround myself with? Who do I walk this thing out with day by day by day? But in terms of him encountering God in a tangible, practical way, I don't think that there's any doubt that he would say that that's what happened to him over the course of that weekend. Not only did, the conversation and the prayer happen Saturday night, we go to Epiphany Sunday morning. For the first time, he goes to church via invitation of a friend. Sunday night, he even went to the block church. You guys did a double church that day, where I performed that evening on the lineup with 10 other artists. And there was like an altar kind of call, like, hey, if you want to respond to the gospel, understand God's heart for you and love for you, invitations like made. And I just, in that space, God is doing something. I don't know, as it is with all seeds that are sown, some get planted on good soil, some get planted on rocky, some get planted around some thorns that choke it out, right? There, a lot of things could happen in T's life to make it go a different direction. But man, it feels like good soil to me. Like that kid's heart he has felt that way since the very first time I met him in Jersey. Like that is the way I would describe him, is like, man, he seems like good soil. He's worth the time and investment in relationship.
Absolutely.
And I think I've been looking for years of like, man, how do I try to make Jesus known to T? And it's so funny that it was like, just tell him he needs Jesus, in that place of vulnerability, there's an answer to that vulnerability. As you said, a glowing poet, there's an answer to that purposelessness that you feel. There is a purpose in sowing seeds and being on mission as a poet, and it's available to you. You don't have to clean yourself up to receive God's love.
Yeah.
So I just want to encourage you guys with that. Like, y'all are killing it.
Yeah. I would say shout out to T as well, that his heart is so open, so receptive, and so willing to actually think and apply what he has. He's so not defensive about it. And that challenged me of like, is there more change I could have in my life were I to be more open to what God puts in front of me?
Yeah, thank you, T-Sleeveless, for even just being in our space and being willing to set the stage of openness and vulnerability and be open for help, and then to say, hey, I need prayer. I would love some prayer. And I think it is hard sometimes when you've been in church for a long time and you've been in these spaces, and sometimes you're like, well, why don't we see people come to faith, or why don't we see our own lives grow? And I think there is a sense of authenticity that we have to seek after. And sometimes meeting new friends is a way to kind of get reminded by God of just what he's doing, and that he's constantly moving in his spirit in ways that we would never expect. I think when I met T, it was like, okay, like I saw the good soil that Scott saw, but I think I lacked a little bit of faith of when would this happen, and to see even just him constantly being around and constantly wanting to be real and be authentic is the doorway that God used to even just meet him so many times. And just one of those times happened to be at Two Lines.
Yeah. It's good. Shout out to you, T. Thank you for letting us share the story. We did ask permission, cause we didn't want to, say anything crazy, but the heart of this podcast is to share about the impact that the ministry of Ripe Creatives and within that, things like Two Lines or Creatives Philly or the artists that are a part of our team or the worship team, the gigs that we go to, like what's the impact? What's the fruit? It would be easy to do an episode and say, the show went well every time we do a show. Yep. Yeah. We don't do that. We don't do episodes with just, hey, it went well. Mm. We really look for moments to tell a story that's worth sharing, where God was doing something unique and share the nuance of that. I just want to encourage you, like, if you're here, you're listening to this and you are a follower of Christ, evangelism is not that hard.
Yep.
We make it a lot harder than it actually is. Sometimes it is just listening to people and being prayerful and being mindful and letting God speak through us. We don't always have to be able to break down the entirety of the gospel for a part of the gospel to be shared in a way that would connect to create more conversation. Sometimes all it takes is, hey, do you want to come to church with us the next day? Mm-hmm. Hey, is it cool if a few of us pray for you? Hey, thank you for sharing that. I would love to hear more about what created that thing for you. Hey, do you want to come to this other church with us? Right? Like God is seeking and saving the lost. He came and sought us. He found us. He got us out of the garbage truck. He pulled us out of mess. And we're still broken, but he loves us anyway. But he wants to do that with everybody. And so we just, as I've said before on podcasts about Two Lines, like we get to be the one that says, hey, do you hear that knock? Open the door. And I think God has been knocking on T's heart for a long time. That night was a night where the knock was a little bit more audible to him. Yeah. And that whole weekend. And so it's not that hard. You can do it. Invite people into what you've experienced in the faith. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing to do. Yeah,
I think evangelism is always worth it because a lot of times we don't know the result of the seeds we're planting. A lot of times, even like the knock on T's heart, is a culmination of years of other seeds being planted, and it just came to that point overall.
Probably from his childhood.
Yeah.
Well, prayers that his grandmother prayed or his mom prayed. Like, this has nothing to do with us. We're just getting to tell a story from our vantage point in a microcosm of God. God's been after him for 20 plus years, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think like with evangelism to always be prayerful, to always be open to the Lord, and to remember that our faith in evangelism is in our commitment to the Lord and his ability to work. It's not our faith in the results we see in front of us.
Yeah. It's very much it's about the motives in the mission. My heart is pure. My heart is pure towards this. Go for it. Like, hey, I have this particular thing I like. We like poetry. And so we said, let's invite people that like poetry into our space. Let's show them what we also love. We are in deep love with Jesus. And we're in love with Jesus as a community. We exemplify that. We live that out. And so even if I don't have to necessarily get off the mic and tell somebody that I'm in love with Jesus, they know. And I've had moments like that where it's very surprising. People are like, oh yeah, this is a Christian thing, right? And we don't necessarily say like, God, for God so loved the world, he gave his only son. We don't necessarily go into all these different details, but we show love and we care and we listen and we're humble and we just go into a space and we let God move, and then people see that, and it's usually a positive thing that's a Christian place. It's not like, and those are just the doorways in. And so it's nice to be able to do that. I mean, really, like, you just show up and you let God move.
Amen. It's a heck of a story, and excited to see what comes of it. It's excited to see where things lead. Not just for T in particular in this story that we've been sharing mostly about, but for Two Lines in general. Two Lines is just continuing to be a space where, people come in with a lot of different perspectives, a lot of different views, and they get shown a glimpse of the kingdom. They get shown a glimpse of who Jesus is through this art form of spoken word and through relationships and community in general. So shout out to Two Lines for being amazing. Every single month you can find them somewhere here in the city, primarily at Deeks in the summer months, and then primarily at a place called Top Mop Studios, potentially, where we're shooting this podcast actually right now in the winter months. So make sure you guys tap in with Two Lines. We just want to say thank you so much to everybody who's been listening to this podcast. I know it's been a full, long episode with a whole bunch of craziness. Thank you for locking in and listening to this entire episode to get to this point. If you already partner with us in Ripe Creatives, just know stories like this is what you're sowing into, right? You're sowing into stories of opportunities for the gospel to be presented to people in real time. Every single place that we go, every single thing that we do, this is the end game, is to share Jesus with people. And that's the heartbeat. So thank you for partnering with us so that we get to do stuff like this and try to make an impact on people's lives. If you're here, you don't partner with us, I would highly encourage you to go to ripecreatives.com, click the give button, and consider becoming a monthly partner with what we do. Your support enables us to continue doing things like Two Lines Philly and Creatives Philly and everything else that we have going on. We would love to continue to do all that we've been doing. And that's only possible through people partnering with us. So we would highly encourage you to jump on our website and consider doing that. Simone, Greg, thank you guys so much for being on today's episode. Any final thoughts before we sign off?
Well, I would just like to say, free the poets!
Now's the time for that. 85 minutes in.
That's probably the most Two Lines ending to a show you can get, though.
Facts. Shout out to Two Lines. Shout out to y'all. Until next time, stay right.